Okay, in this video we're going to be checking out the Eachine VWhoop90. This is like a hybrid hovercraft and tiny whoop, and this little servo here will pop up these two back ducts so that you can actually do the hovercraft mode, and then in this mode here where the ducts level, it will fly as a tiny whoop, and it's on an auxiliary switch here. So as you can see here, I have the on a switch, and you can have it all the way down or all the way up, and the servo moves it. And so I'm just going to do a little line of sight here, show you how it flies and also how it hovercrafts, and then we'll do some FPV with it as well. Basically, it's just like a brushless tiny whoop 1S, and I'll show you all the specs and everything at the end of the video on the bench at the end of the video. Okay, so we'll fly it as a hovercraft first. Put the ducts up, give it a little throttle. Actually, I have to arm it. Give it a little bit of throttle. So forward stick will move it forward. Left. So basically, you're using the right stick only. If you combine yaw, you can get a little bit more turns, faster turns. So you can do both yaw and aileron together, like this. So that's essentially what you can do, and you want to do this on a kind of a flat, even surface like this. Otherwise, on carpet, I didn't really find it worked that well. At least in my house, it didn't. It kept getting snagged up on the bottom and flipping over. But on this nice little flat surface, you can definitely hovercraft it as much as possible here. And I'm going full stick forward here on the right stick. So that's full stick forward to make it go. If you don't do that, it kind of just slows down a lot. Or you can give it more throttle. So you can go more throttle and more full stick forward. And it took me about a few minutes to get used to it. A couple of batteries, but once you figure it out, it's not that hard. You have to kind of combine the left stick and right stick, so yaw and aileron together to make it turn, and throttle and elevator forward to make it go forward. Now, to make it go backwards, you can give it more throttle and try and make it go backwards. It's pretty difficult. I have tried that a little bit here. You can go backwards here. I mean, the front ducts will lift up like that, as you can see. But I have been able to get it to go backwards. It's not easy. But that's pretty much it for the hovercraft. You can obviously do little hovercraft races with this and FPV it. That'd be kind of fun. But then if you flip the switch for the ducts and bring them down, you can fly it like a tiny whoop here. Like this. It's kind of windy, so you can see it's getting bounced around a lot in the wind here. It's kind of why I'm in the tennis courts, so there's a little bit more wind protection. It's coming from my left to my right. Oh, and that's the end of the battery already. So yeah, that's the one thing. It's small 250 milliamp hour LiPo 1S. Batteries don't last too long. Okay, so I'm gonna try one more battery and just do a little bit of acro flips and stuff, and then we'll do some FPV. So I'll go ahead and arm it. All right, so I'm not sure what the rates are like, and this is stock settings, so I'm just gonna go a little higher. And I'll do flips. Oh, and it gets all out of sorts there. So probably not going to be doing acro flips with this one. I think it's because of the nature of the hovercraft. Yeah, if you're higher up, you can do some flips. I don't think I'll be doing that FPV. I'm just going to fly it around normal. But you know, it's kind of like having ducks and the washouts, but like to a more extreme level. But I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, so here's just a little FPV flying. Basically, with all the extra weight of the foam board that's on the outside of the ducts, to allow it to be a hovercraft. It doesn't fly that great as a tiny whoop. Basically, and to summarize it in a word, it's very sluggish. It's when you're trying to fly it around, very slow in reacting to inputs, and that could, I think that has a little bit with the tune, but not really that much. It just has a lot to do with the fact that there's all that extra weight on the outside, basically, of the ducts, and that just makes the whole thing very sluggish. If you're okay with flying something like that, this is probably no problem. It should be okay for most beginners that don't really know the difference. You know, if they want to do hovercraft and tiny whoop in a 2-in-1, this should be fine for those guys because they won't be able to know the difference anyway. But if you're a experienced pilot looking for a performance tiny whoop, this is definitely not it. So this is kind of a novelty, I think, in terms of being a 2-in-1. If you want to do races with this one, it would be kind of interesting. It would have to be a spec race because everyone would have the same VWhoop, and they would obviously have the same limitations that you have. Obviously, another one of the limitations here is a very short flight time. You get about 2.5 minutes of flight time on the 250 milliamp hour LiPo, this 1S setup, which is, you know, kind of short compared to, you know, when you're flying something with this prop size, like the Snapper 7, you get in like 4.5 minutes, 5 minutes. So it's like half the flight time, but with a smaller battery. But the Snapper 7 is also flying on a 450 and not a 250, so that makes a big difference. Anyway. Okay, so here's just a little bit of a closer look at this thing. I know you guys are kind of curious to what all kind of parts are in here and specs and all that. Of course, you can check the link for more details. It's going to cover this very briefly, kind of quickly. 75mm props, so it's basically kind of like the Snapper 7, which is the 1S, but the motors are, not sure if they'll come out here on camera or not. It's an 0802 19,000 kV motor. You can just barely make it out there. So it's similar to the motors that are on the Mobula 7, but it's the 1S motor. The one on the Mobula 7, I think it's 16,000 kV, so this is a higher kV. I don't think this one will do 2S. I know you guys are going to wonder. And then the board on here is the Crazy Bee F3, their first version, not the Pro, so it's the 1S version, not the 2S. You can see that they put the connectors, the plugs on for the motors sideways. And you can see that the way that they mounted this in here, it's at an angle, and kind of difficult to see. So it's off at an angle kind of like this, lower here, higher here where the USB port is, and then the battery, you get 3 of these batteries by the way, goes into the slot here. Fairly difficult to get the battery in and out, and it's rubbing against these wires. You have to be kind of careful when you take the battery in and out. This here kind of needs, I think they need to redesign. This is not a good spot for the battery. Maybe put the battery up top somewhere, something like that. Maybe have the plug come out. I don't know, something different would be better. But essentially using Snapper 7 parts with the different motors, 0802 19,000 kV motors, 75mm props, smaller batteries here also. So the flight times are kind of short, as you saw. I think it would have been better to go with the 450 1S instead of the 250. The flights are way shorter on the 250. This gets the same camera, all-in-one camera. Got this Snapper 7, Mobula 7, all those guys have. Now this one does have the button, of course, to change your band's channel power, but it has that green wire there for VTX remote control. But it's wired up, you can see. But for whatever reason, it wasn't working out of the box. I think maybe a configuration change might be needed. I didn't change anything, flew with the PIDs they came with. They did come with the PID tune, all the settings that it came with. I didn't want to mess up the servo, whatever. They're using the servo tilt function and Betaflight to operate this servo. So basically, you should set up channel 2 or aux 2 on your transmitter to this, switch for this, and just have it on a 2-position switch, either up or down. So it'll be flat like this or vertical. You could also use that channel for like maybe a dial if you want to do varying degrees of tilt on the back motors, for example. You could do that. Obviously, you get some different flight characteristics. Obviously, you just want to do flat for tiny whoop mode and vertical for hovercraft mode. So, yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of the specs, motors, frame. Obviously, it's all attached to this hovercraft foam board stuff here to keep it light. Fairly lightweight. I thought it would be heavier, but I think it's like 30 something grams. I think it's like 31.8, so about 32 grams. So I thought this actually would have been heavier, so it would have been nice to see this in a 2S, you know, maybe a slightly different design on the mounting of the board, for example. Not sure where you'd put it with the servo up here on top, but it kind of gives you, this 2-in-1 function. You can do the hovercraft mode or the tiny whoop mode. But you can see with this sort of, the way the frame is and everything, the way it flies is not the greatest for tiny whoop mode. Seems to work totally fine in hovercraft mode. I thought it was totally good in hovercraft mode, but the other mode for tiny whoop is kind of like, not really ideal. It does fly, but not that great, as you saw in the foot demo. Anyway guys, that's the end of the video, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.